Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
I'm Jason.
And I plan on writing a poem about this epic pie.
Interesting.
More on that later.
A little spoiler there into our draft episode discussion.
Little razzle dazzle.
Yeah, we brought it back. Second ever draft episode from VCR.
That's right. We had so much fun the last time. We're bringing it back.
Yeah.
New topics, new categories.
And you know what? From the little feedback I've heard about our podcast, this one seemed to be really well received. A lot of people had fun with this last time, so we're doing it again. Before we get into what we drafted, let's maybe fill in like the details of the rules here. About a month ago, we each randomly picked a category, and then we had to draft 3 movies. And in Michael's case, he ended up getting 6 seasons and a movie, so more on that later.
Woof.
Yeah, so we each got our own category, and then we had to pick 3 movies that kind of joined or connected and tell a story with those 3 movies, essentially. So I got franchise. Jason, you got actor or actress. And Michael, you got 6 seasons and a movie.
I sure did.
That's too much.
Slightly too much.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
I guess my question for you, Mike, is how do you want to split this? Because last time, the way we discussed it is we each did a movie and we each talked about our movie. Have you thought about how you want to approach this discussion at all?
Are you asking me because I have the most content to go through?
Not necessarily, the most content, but also because, like, do you want to discuss the TV show in between our discussion? Like, do you want to do only talk twice?
Well, spoiler alert, but this TV show I'm talking about has 3 seasons, and I've only seen one of them. So, but it kind of fits when I tell you more about the show. Do you guys want to guess the show that I'm talking about?
Oh, I'm already like 90% sure that you did Ash vs. the Evil Dead and the Evil Dead series.
Well, then you don't know me as well as you think you do, because I did.
Damn it!
That's right. So.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I didn't do
Is it My Little Pony?
Well, that's my other podcast, which you guys don't need to know about. So,
So if it was me, I would have picked the Twilight Zone.
why don't you guys just run through it, and then we'll save me for the end. We'll build the anticipation. Actually, you know what? Why don't I read some quotes from this TV show just to get people's minds turning?
Interesting.
Okay. So I will. It's 6 seasons in a movie. So this TV show has 3 seasons. And then there was a movie that came out in between the 2nd and 3rd season. So I'm going to read a couple quotes from the TV show, and then I'm going to read a couple quotes from the movie. Actually,
Okay.
I'm going to start with the movie, and then I'm going to go to the TV show. So let me just pull up my notes here. And by the way, this director isn't necessarily known for his dialogue, but wow. Here's one of my favorite quotes. I'll just say character A and character B, just for the sake of obscuring things. So character
Why don't side note before you start too, why don't you do a couple of quotes here, and then between each of our, like, mine and Jason's movies, hit another quote and see if we can guess it off the quote.
Okay, so here's quote 1. You know, Agent Desmond, I figure this whole office, furniture included, is worth $27,000.
Okay, only give us one more before.
Okay, I'm just gonna spoil my favorite quote then. I'm as blank as a fart.
What a wonderful quote.
What a wonderful quote.
I'm gonna guess once. Don't tell me if I'm right or not, based on those. Lethal Weapon.
Oh,
Maybe not.
because there's an agent in there. Maybe. That's a good guess. I have nothing right now.
Okay, well, we'll come back to me.
All right. Do you guys want to guess me or Jason?
You go first.
I'm gonna say Lethal Weapon.
Okay.
Just because you said it.
Fair enough. If we both did Lethal Weapon, that'd be
That would be
interesting.
Could you
Really
imagine if I also picked an actor for...
You picked Mel Gibson and just did all Lethal Weapon
Whoops.
movies.
That would be funny. Franchises, eh? Is it Rocky?
Is not Rocky.
Rambo.
Is definitely not Rambo.
He's not into Rambo as much.
Terminator.
It's not Terminator, but Terminator was up there in my choices. It made the second final cut.
Is it a classically known like franchise? Like everyone knows it?
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars.
No.
Star Trek.
No. All right, I'm going to cut you off there. You've guessed a lot. Jason, for actor, actress, Mike and I get a few guesses here as well. Actor, is it actor or is it actress?
It's an actor.
Okay. I feel like you didn't do Jack Nicholson this time because you did him in Chinatown.
Charles Bronson.
Humphrey Bogart was one that I was maybe thinking you might have picked.
I picked something that would throw you guys off completely because I didn't
Ooh.
pick something that's like very obvious.
Interesting.
Like it's not like I didn't pick like an artsy, like a really good actor. I picked the worst actor ever.
Oh no.
No, he's not bad. He had some. He was worth watching.
But is he kind of not regarded as one of the greats?
No,
is
okay.
is he Canadian?
no,
Is it Bruce Campbell?
no.
Okay.
I don't know. Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, comedian.
He had a very quick rise, a very quick fall, and then a blank period, and then a quick rise, like a little jump recently.
Paul Hogan?
No, is he
Okay.
back?
I don't know if he's back or not.
I don't think so.
Did you say Hulk Hogan?
I said Paul Hogan. You know, Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, okay.
I would love to see him in something new.
Brother.
I would too.
I thought
Hey,
you said-
brother. I'd like to thank the Academy.
No, I'm stuck on
I'm
yours.
genuinely curious, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Okay. So,
Who is a one-hit wonder?
So he was huge in the 90s. He started in the 80s and was like one of the top billed guys in the early 90s.
Oh, is it Steven Seagal?
No.
is it Jim Carrey?
No.
It's oh my God, what's his name? Val Kilmer.
No, it's not that exciting.
But Val Kilmer
There's-
fits the mold here.
Is he back too?
A
Something
little bit.
recently?
He was in Top Gun Maverick.
Thanks to
Oh,
AI.
yeah.
He had a documentary. All right, let's cut to the chase here. Let's announce what you and I did each, and talk about why we picked what we picked, I guess.
I still want to keep you guys on the hook though.
All right, well maybe I'll start then.
Okay.
I started with 30 movie franchises. Like I wrote a list of all the movie franchises that came to my head. I did some Googling, and then I kind of narrowed it down to maybe like 5. From there, I narrowed it down to a couple more. I down to 3, and I talked to like a bunch of family and friends, kind of looked online, people's thoughts of each one. Recently, Jess has been giving me a lot of trouble, and some of our other listeners for not picking like movies that are super mainstream.
We've gone really off the beaten path
We
the
Yeah.
last
have
few weeks.
recently.
I mean,
We've
who the
watched some
fuck
good
wants
stuff.
to watch Aguirre? Like,
Oh my God, Aguirre was awesome. Shut the hell
All
up,
right.
Michael. You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. That was said so like not confidently. Side note.
yeah, you're gonna have to get better at shit talking me.
I decided to pick one of the most mainstream, long-running movie series of all time. Do you have a guess, Michael?
Indiana Jones.
No, but that would have been very timely and
It
a
would have
good
been,
idea.
Yeah. Hmm.
It made the top of the list, but didn't quite get there.
Have we covered any of the movies on the podcast?
No.
I should have led with that question like 5 minutes ago, but
It's a movie series that every movie captures the era in which that movie takes place in very well. And it's very interesting because every movie feels like a time capsule of that period.
Alien?
No, but Alien was also on my list.
no, it can't be The Godfather because we've
No.
already
us-
done it.
Give us like a better hint. Come on.
So I've actually had 2 box sets of this movie series on my side table. Mike, you've been hanging out at my house for probably like 2-3 weeks, 2-3 times, and every time I was like, I should move those, and then I forget every time, and yeah, you miss them. It's a movie series that my grandparents actually gave me in my teenage years to watch.
Is it horror?
No,
Okay.
Comedy?
no.
Action.
Yes.
Oh, it's James Bond. It's James Bond.
There we go.
Yeah.
The most mainstream
Wow.
movie series of all time. Like, the longest running, like, yeah.
Jesus Christ. Why did it take us so long to get there?
I was scared because I kept leaving it out like that, and you just kept not saying anything about it, and I was worried because I was like, I keep forgetting that, and I don't want to spoil it.
I mean, I saw it, but it obviously didn't make an impression on me.
Yeah, I'm very curious to know which 3 you picked too.
Yeah, because there's I believe 27 movies in the series, so it's a very interesting movie series. I did go through some of the best, obviously. Like, I want to showcase the best that James Bond has to offer. But there's also, a balance about the history behind James Bond as well. So, give or take with each of them. Jason, let's hear what you picked.
Okay, so I didn't do any like fancy writing down 30 options thing. I wanted to watch one movie and one movie only, and then it's just been on my list, and I'm like, I really got to see that. And so that's one thing I'll tell you. It's all of these movies are from the 90s. And this actor, yeah, he's come back up recently with a series, but he didn't really do TV before, obviously in the 90s. He has a mullet. He was very Mel Gibson-esque. Like, they were both like peaking at the same time. They probably hung out a lot.
It's not Sylvester Stallone, is it?
No.
No, he was before that time.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's a household name, really.
It's not Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was the 70s, right?
Yeah, that was he's too early.
I don't think he's come back either.
No, that's true.
He did 2 baseball movies that I didn't do.
Oh, it's Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Oh, Kevin Costner. Yeah.
Isn't that a weird one to pick for like a serious thing like this? Like, picking 3. I could have picked some amazing actors.
No,
He never
you know what?
He never went away though. Wasn't he always kind of big?
Not really.
He kind of faded a little bit. I think Waterworld kind of killed his career for a few years.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see what you watched, Jason. I'm going to guess you watched, and you guys could guess what I watched for James Bond after this, but I'm going to guess you watched Waterworld and you watched Dances with Wolves for 2 of your 3.
You'll find out.
Cool.
Okay.
I recently watched Dances with Wolves for the first time, and I really, really liked it. So.
Okay.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, there's like at least 5 movies that I really wanted to watch, and there's some technical problems that I had that led me to watch the ones that I did. I'll tell you 2 that I really wanted to watch was A Perfect World, which is it's a Clint Eastwood directed movie, and it was like one of his like best acting credits. And then the other one was I forget right now.
He also had the Robin Hood movie.
Oh yeah, with the Bryan Adams song.
Possibly, yeah. I think my brother-in-law really, really likes that movie.
He actually had a few like really good movies, and then like he had this major divorce during while he was filming Waterworld, and then from there, like the one before that was
Oh, I was just gonna say, Val Kilmer had a very public divorce during the filming of The Island of Dr. Moreau, and that movie was also a shit show. So
yeah, but that wasn't his fault necessarily.
I'm just saying, maybe just don't go through a divorce when you're filming a giant movie. It's bad for business.
Yeah, it was Wyatt Earp is another big movie of his, but that it's like a documentary style, or like it's based on a real person or whatever, but that was such a big flop that when he was doing Waterworld, like he was in a funk.
He's great on Yellowstone though.
Exactly.
Like he is really like, I watched a couple episodes here and there with my parents during the pandemic, and I remember being like, oh wow, like he can actually act. Like,
okay, so I think now that we know our movies, and Mike, you're going to keep us hanging a little bit longer. So with James Bond, like I said, it's a very timely movie. It's a time capsule into the time period in which it comes out. Each movie is almost like a response to the times, the movies that they came out in. So there's also, the discussion of the different actors who played James Bond and everything. And I wanted to cover like all of these different aspects of it, right? So I did it in kind of a chronological order of movies that I was going to watch, because I wanted to see, how James Bond has evolved over time as well, right? So to start off, like James Bond, I think you have to start with the classic James Bond, the OG James Bond, Sean Connery, right?
Yeah.
And so to start off with Sean Connery, he's got some really classic James Bond movies. There's two of his that are classified as some of the best James Bond movies of all time. But I went for I went right for the throat with Goldfinger, the 1964 James Bond movie.
You had to.
I had to, right? It's often considered the best James Bond movie of the entire series. There is a couple more. There's one in particular that sometimes competes for that title, and I did do that one as well, so I'll discuss that one later.
Okay.
But this is a really fascinating movie. It came out in 1964. It's the third James Bond movie in the series. It is based on one of the novels, and it's this novel of the same name, Goldfinger. So it's directly from the source material from Ian Fleming, the MI6 military defense intelligence guy who wrote these novels, who based them heavily off of his own personal experiences and the experiences of the people around him. So it's a really fascinating movie. And it's also a weird movie because, this movie is, in a sense, the movie that all James Bond movies, that all thriller movies, that everything that comes after it is based off of. Because this is the movie that nails the formula. There's no other James Bond movie. Like, this is the movie that realized every component that needs to be in a James Bond movie to make a thriller successful, basically. And so it's almost, in a sense, a victim of its own success. Because as I was watching it, I enjoyed it, but every single detail of this film has been copied, parodied, reused, rehashed, remixed. Like, there's nothing, it feels like there's nothing original about this film because everything about it was so original at the time that everybody took every aspect of this film and used it in some way or another.
That's awesome.
It's the weirdest thing I've ever experienced in my entire life because I'd never seen this film before, and yet I'd seen every single detail of this film.
It's kind of like when you go back and you watch classics from like the 40s and you're like, you get such a weird sense of deja vu, but you're watching the movies that invented the cliches.
Exactly. And that is this in a nutshell. Like, this movie shows off like fancy cars, good-looking women. It's the first movie that really shows off technology and like makes tech a focal point of the James Bond series. It's got crazy villains with even crazier plans that almost don't even really make sense, but somehow they do. It's got, the villain expositioning the plot to the main character when he's got him in like an absolute death trap kind of thing that you can't imagine him ever possibly being able to escape from. It's Sean Connery at his most suave, ordering a drink, womanizing everybody, like, it's literally the quintessential James Bond film.
Which, like, how many was Sean Connery the Bond for until this one?
So this was the third James Bond movie ever, and so this is his third outing. I believe he played James Bond 7 times.
Jesus.
But like I said, this is the movie that all of these components were finally brought together, and then everything else after this becomes some version of that, essentially. The shaken not stirred quote comes from this movie. I could go on and on and on about like all of everything related to this movie. So
is this the movie where the famous quote like, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die"?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
So here's the thing: is like, for a movie that comes out in 1964, it moves at a pretty brisk pace. And that's something that I'll say about all James Bond movies, is you have to be very locked in to watch James Bond. Because you're traveling to all of these exotic locations constantly. One connection leads to another connection. And if you look away for a second, you're going to completely lose track of this movie and lose sight of what's happening in these films. So these are movies you have to be very locked in on. What I'll also say is every James Bond, like every 007, changes in their persona every movie. And sometimes they're a little more subtle than others, but Sean Connery's James Bond is definitely the most, like, one of the most suave out of all of them. He's probably the one who's simultaneously most confident in himself and least confident in himself. Like, he's very, you know, he grabs his alcohol and he's like always like over the top. This is the 60s. He's over the top womanizing women, and it's comical in a way because like all of his coworkers just like laugh it off. Like, there are several times where his coworkers are like, there goes James Bond being an alcoholic womanizer again.
Yeah. What is it? Mrs. Pennyworth or whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many times where they bring it up, so it becomes kind of like an inside joke that he's, you know, he's not a good person necessarily.
So I just read Casino, the book by
Oh.
Ian Fleming, and like the whole point of James Bond in his original like books was that you wouldn't notice him in a crowd, whereas Sean Connery just walks up to the bar and like looks like a devilish handsome man smoking
with
a
like
cigar, like
awesome accent, like
yeah. So like he like probably saved the franchise because a movie about a boring man, he's very meticulous, like every little detail, like he thinks it all out, like there's all these little details, but then this guy just walks up to the bar and like he's like slaps a girl on the ass and like
yeah.
that kind of thing.
And he's got a lot of like quippy one-liners as well throughout the film. And it's probably like the film that has the most kind of cheesy one-liners, and they work for the most part. They're pretty entertaining. But he's definitely like, you know, like I said, he's got his own style. He's definitely the most suave out of all the James Bond actors that I watched. And that's what made this film really interesting. And also, you know, because of some of the dated how he treats women and stuff is pretty bad. But it's funny because it's like so ridiculous. Like, you know, this would never be something that you would look up to in today's day and age, right? Like, it's just so bizarre. And he's such an alcoholic throughout too.
What an aspiration.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a weird movie to watch because everything is derivative of that James Bond movie in particular. So it's almost a movie that you watch for historical movie purposes. Like, I think that there are people who are going to really enjoy it, and I would recommend going back and checking it out, but it's also a very weird experience, and it was the weirdest experience of the three watching it.
How was the villain?
I almost forgot to say that as well. So the villain in Goldfinger is probably the best villain out of all the James Bond movies. So you've got Auric Goldfinger, the very, very wealthy. He's a gold dealer basically. But the other thing is there's not only one of the best James Bond villains of all time. There's actually two. And that is his henchman, Oddjob. Oddjob is this like small but very jacked Korean man who has like it's almost like a metallic hat that he basically like whips at people and kills them with it.
It's supposed to be like a bowler hat, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like, out of all of the villains, those two are bar none my favorite two villains of the entire series. So this movie does have reasons to go back and check it out. But, you know, like I said, it's dated in the times. What's really interesting as well is because this is the movie where technology became so important to the James Bond series. The technology at that time, the groundbreaking technology, is like a GPS in somebody's car. And they're like, look at this, a GPS, and it's in our car.
Whoa.
Amazing.
We should figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think we have to do it on the podcast at some time in more detail, but I think that's where I'm going to leave it. And Jason, I'm really interested in hearing what your first Kevin Costner movie is.
Okay, I have just one more question though. Like the Bond girl. Who is the Bond girl of that movie?
There's actually several in this one.
Oh, not just one? Such a womanizer, they had to have multiple.
They had multiple. The obvious one, I guess the number one Bond girl of this is Pussy Galore.
Yeah.
So most of James Bond's women in the films, and they're often like villains of the films as well, they often have double entendre kind of names or like completely ridiculous names like that. And that Pussy Galore is probably the most ridiculous one. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about, especially back at that time, whether or not that name was allowed to be involved in a movie. But
Yeah.
anyway, Pussy Galore, she owns like a plane company that has a bunch of other women who do flights and do all these crazy tricks on their planes and stuff like that. I don't really want to spoil the plot of Goldfinger, and I'm not probably going to talk about the plot of the movies, any of them, in great detail, because, like I said, they're so packed full of details and full of locations and sets and everything like that. What I will say about Goldfinger as well is that the villain plot is like the most over the top, completely crazy plot out of all of them, and that's why a lot of like I said, this film feels like you've seen it before because the plot is so ridiculous that it's been copied in a sense. And it's also, like every movie, the time period is also kind of relevant to who the villain is. So in the 60s, the villain is actually China in this film.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's China versus America, actually. It's not even China versus Britain. It's China versus America, and James Bond kind of just gets involved in this plot, essentially.
Exciting.
Yeah. So, Jason, let's hear your first Kevin Costner movie.
All right, so I think I just lead off with the one, like the reason I wanted to watch Kevin Costner. I just wanted to watch Waterworld.
Yeah, okay. I thought it might be Waterworld that you picked, yeah.
Yeah, especially like I was preambling a little bit earlier about the like the divorce and everything, like some of the reasons why he fell off a little bit.
Right.
And so Waterworld, it's basically Mad Max on water. It was in like the director Kevin Reynolds. He was like approached by a studio and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do something kind of Mad Maxy?" And he was like, "Fuck yeah, let's do it on water."
Because who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, exactly. So it was directly inspired for the most part on that, and that's like there's so many similarities. The set design and the costume design, it's just unreal. Like it was really fun to watch. Overall, it's a very fun movie. I didn't even notice any like really bad acting or anything like that. It's mostly I think that there was a like kind of a fight between Kevin Costner and Kevin Reynolds, where they both wanted his character, who's known as the Mariner. He doesn't have a name in the Kevin Costner version. There's 2 or 3 cuts of this. The director's cut is what the original Kevin Reynolds cut. That didn't make it to theaters because Kevin Costner basically fired him and was like, "I'm recutting this.
Wow.
This is the theatrical release. I want it this way." And they were also like, this was the most expensive movie in the world up to that point until Titanic, like the next year or year after, whatever. Anyways, I watched the deep cut, the Ulysses cut, and that's like the full everything. It's quite a bit. Yeah, so the villains were great. There was basically Kevin Costner is on, like the whole world is covered in water. Everyone's living on these boats, and there's little villages. I forget what they're called, like just villages, like floating villages, and that's like where most people live. He is kind of like an outsider. He does his own thing on his own little catamaran, and he's got such a sick boat. When
It's like the interceptor of the ocean.
yeah, exactly. Like he the first shot of the movie is him, like, is between his legs, him pissing into a cup, and then he pours that cup into like a contraption that turns it into fresh water.
Nice.
And
What a way to introduce your hero.
I know, right?
Drinking his own piss.
Yeah. And then like he actually drinks from the bottom of the contraption some fresh water, and then he spits that into a plant that he's like trying to keep alive. And then some shit happens, and like it seems like he has like this big catamaran ship that would be like he can't run it on his own, but then he like kicks a switch, and then automatically the sails pop up, and there's all these like gadgets that he has created to make his life like sustainable by himself on this fairly big ship. It is so cool when that like first kicked in. The villains are called smokers, and they live on this massive old freighter that's like a USS, like big US ship, like a army ship, and it's just full of cigarettes and alcohol, and that's why they're called the smokers. In like the deep cut or the Ulysses cut, they're like religious fanaticists that have built this whole thing. This is like 300 or 400 years after the apocalypse like really kicked in. And man, such a fun movie. Honestly, like Kevin Costner's character was very stoic and sullen, much like Mad Max, and especially in like the newer Mad Max. It's great.
Okay, highly recommended.
I'm really excited that you picked that one. I haven't watched Waterworld, and the reason why I haven't watched it is actually because of this podcast. It's a movie that I'm really excited to do actually sometime, because Mad Max is one of my favorite film series and heroes of film of all time. I've been really excited to watch that one because of all the controversy related to it. So that is definitely one we're going to visit in the next year, I think.
Yeah, I recommend it to anyone really. Like, there's some really cool concepts at play here, and they've like thought out, like there's a lot of good ideas, and it's a great post-apocalyptic like take that you don't see in any other, like there hasn't been another Waterworld type post-apocalypse.
How's the villain of that series? Like Lord Humongous, Mike and I, when we did Mad Max 2.
Yeah.
One of my favorite villains of all time. Just in what
Just walk away. Just walk away.
So it's a guy named he's the Deacon, and
Oh, that's cool.
he lives on this ship. He's like the head of he's created this whole religious vibe just to keep all the people that are on this ship in
like
in
a cult.
check. Yeah, like he's a cult leader, and like you have to be in this situation. They these floating island things are called atolls, and they've been going around like robbing all of these atolls, killing everybody, and then like suddenly he's like, where's all the atolls? Like why are they all gone? And his little accountant guy that follows him around with a book, like he's the only guy who can write in the movie, he's like, well, we might have killed them all. Like he doesn't realize that he kind of believes his own bullshit, you know.
Interesting.
He loses his eye in the beginning of the movie, and it's like a very disgusting, like they like had to fix it up, and they put in a fake eye, and he's like, how does it look? And all like his cronies are like, looks gorgeous, sir. And like there's a lot of really fun playful stuff in the Ulysses cut. The Deacon is mapping out a course to intercept the Mariner, Kevin Costner, and Jack Black is just randomly in the background, like uncredited.
Whoa, hey.
And he wasn't credited in the actual release because he wasn't in it.
Right.
But it was like a really cool little thing.
So is the Ulysses cut the definitive way to check that movie out, would you say?
I would say so, because like it's a little bit choppy, but they did a pretty damn good job. It was actually released on Blu-ray because they did such a good job. And I would definitely watch it that way. It's it gives you the backstory of the villains a lot more, and just the world in general. So there's pretty good world building.
What I'll say as well before we wrap up this film, we should also say where these movies are available. And so I just looked up, Waterworld is available streaming on Prime right now.
Not the Ulysses cut, but yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to have to look for that one, whether it's streaming somewhere else, a little bit more, less kosher.
Yeah.
Or, you buy it online. Goldfinger isn't actually streaming anywhere. You're going to have to rent it. But I think the people who are interested in that style of James Bond, it's well worth your time. It's very interesting film, even though, like I said, it's a very weird watch in 2023.
Yeah, no doubt. One more thing, like Kevin Costner, the Mariner, he's unnamed, but he actually has gills.
Oh, interesting.
So he's a mutant. They call them mutos. He's like rejected by everyone once they find out, like at this one atoll. He's rejected. He's like, get out of here, muto. And then they try and kill him, and then the smokers show up. all that classic stuff. But we find out later that because he has the gills and they're actually functional, he can swim and breathe the water. So he's like the next step of evolution, kind of.
Unfortunately, at that time, they didn't quite have the James Cameron technology down for underwater filming.
No, they did a really good job though. There is quite a bit of filming underwater. There's a lot of accidents. Well, basically, I saw one YouTuber say that like if any movie could get like the most catastrophic, the award for the most catastrophic but least amount of deaths or actual injuries, it would be Waterworld for
Nice.
filming. There was a hurricane that sunk one of the atolls that they built. They filmed off the coast of Hawaii. Kevin Costner and the lead female character or heroine was Jean Triplehorn. Her name is Helen in the movie, and they almost drowned. Same with the little girl, Tina Majorino, and the stunt coordinator. He dove too deep and came up too quick, so he got the bends and almost like exploded from the inside.
Ugh. Yikes.
Yeah, it's crazy filming, lots of problems. Anyways, I could go on, but I won't. I'll stop there.
Sounds good. Mike, let's hear some more quotes. Let's narrow down this mystery a little further.
All right, here's 2 more quotes. And I'll say these are both from the main character. Every day, once a day, give yourself a present.
Okay.
That's very creepy.
And here's the other one. What I want and what I need are 2 different things, Audrey.
Man, I am drawing such a hard blank beyond the guesses that I've already made.
Yeah, like I almost, well, I don't think there's a show.
I'm deliberately not picking like the main big quotes.
Yeah, this like it sounds to me like Hannibal Lecter. Like it sounds Hannibal Lecter-esque, but like Silence of the Lambs and Clarice, all of those movies, Hannibal movies, because there is a show that's more recent than the older movies. I don't think that's it though. It's definitely not it.
Okay.
But it sounds creepy, is what I'm saying.
Maybe just how the way I read it is creepy.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't meant to be creepy.
Is it Buffy?
I don't know. Maybe it is.
Was Buffy 3 seasons? I don't know.
No, you're right. It was a lot
I
of
think
seasons.
Buffy was like 8 seasons or something.
You might be onto something with the Hannibal show though, because I think that was 3 seasons, Jason. You might have gotten there.
I don't know. It was multiple movies though. But
I guess we'll find out.
yeah, Joss Whedon, who wrote Buffy as well as the Avengers, or like directed, produced, whatever he did. He did a bunch of writing for Waterworld. They flew him out to the ship that they were using for the smokers. And
really?
he was like, it was 7 weeks in hell.
Wow.
Gotta love it.
Poor Joss Whedon.
Okay, so was that both quotes?
Yeah, that was the 2 of them.
Awesome.
All right, well,
Creepy.
we're starting to narrow it down, I think. My next movie. So I've skipped over actually quite a few James Bond actors at this point because there was one in particular that I was just personally interested in watching, and it also comes at a time period in which we haven't done necessarily a lot of movies from this time period, but I think that it's maybe a favorite of Jason, Mike, and my own, just because of, you know, the being kids of the 90s, right? So I went with the 1995 film GoldenEye, starring Pierce Brosnan.
You had to.
I had to, right?
Yeah,
I had
of course.
to. Funny enough, I've never actually watched this film because while I did have it on DVD in the collector's box that I had, it's the only one out of all the James Bond movies that I own that's scratched, and I was never able to watch it.
No.
And funny enough as well, what I'll say is I've seen a lot of James Bond movies, but I've watched a lot of the lesser known and less well-received James Bond movies. So for a lot of my life, I didn't think that I actually liked James Bond movies all that much.
I think that's happened like to quite a few people accidentally.
Yeah. And that's part of what this conversation that I wanted to have today too is watching the right James Bond movies and the right James Bond movies for you at the particular moment in time that you're at. And what I'll say about GoldenEye is that it's easily, out of the 3 movies that I watched, my favorite. It's not necessarily the best. Pierce Brosnan isn't even, I would say, the second best James Bond actor of all time. But this movie has a lot of charisma with and it's derivative of 2 film series, actually, and it's a response to 2 film series that are very famous, that actually I think that you've mentioned one of the film series already. Indiana Jones is one of the biggest influences of GoldenEye and Pierce Brosnan's character. The other one being, in my opinion, Die Hard and John McClane. And almost even more so, the Die Hard John McClane movie series. I thought that this movie had a lot of action mixed with comedy, mixed with, everyday Pierce Brosnan. Even though, he's a good-looking dude, he's pretty suave, he feels a lot more everyman than any of the other James Bond actors. And part of the reason for that is this film opens with a mission with him and Sean Bean, actually.
No way.
Together. Yeah, 006.
Oh, yeah. Alex something. Alex.
Yes. Trebek.
No.
Not quite Trebek, but it's close enough to Trebek. I'm going to say Trebek because I don't know if I can. It's Trevelyan or something like that.
I remember that from the video game.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 006 and him are on a mission, and this is really early on in James Bond's career. And so 006 actually dies in the opening scene of the film. And this movie takes place, the bulk of it takes place actually, I believe, 9 years after this events. So it's a decade after into James Bond's career as 007. And what's really interesting about that is I found that he's a lot less sure of himself at this point in time in his career. Like, I think that there's often times where something crazy will happen, like some crazy stunt, and I'll kind of land on his feet, and he'll have this look on his face like, I can't believe I just survived that again. And that happens throughout the film. Like, he's constantly just like, how did I survive that? Like, and it's kind of a fun, entertaining James Bond. It's one of my favorite portrayals of James Bond. It's also a movie because of, some of the stigma around James Bond, the womanizer, the alcoholism, all of that. This movie constantly wants to tell you that it's doing something different. And I actually thought it did that relatively well. This is the first James Bond movie that Judi Dench is introduced as M.
Mm-hmm.
And right off the bat, because, like I said, this is later on in James Bond's career, they kind of are at odds with each other because Judi Dench is this new, the first woman M in ever kind of thing,
right,
both in the film series and in the film universe. And Pierce Brosnan's James Bond is kind of weary of that, but she comes in and she's like, we're doing things differently this time. And she basically says that, like, I get it, I'm different, but this is the way things are now, kind of thing. Like, the old style of drinking and, nice women is gone, kind of thing. And I thought that I really appreciated that aspect of it, that it tried to do its own thing.
I feel like there was like she was like demanding respect or commanding respect.
Exactly.
And that's that's a thing you haven't seen much in the franchise.
Correct. Yeah. It's really fresh. Like, this is a really fresh movie. And if you're a fan of Indiana Jones, the charisma of Indiana Jones, or Die Hard, the series, this movie is so good. I loved this movie. I had so much fun with this movie. This is easily Jess and I's favorite of the James Bond series that we watched. So this movie also has a lot of other cool actors in it, especially of this era that all of us know and love. For example, Robbie Coltrane, who plays Hagrid in Harry Potter, has a starring role, in this film. Joe Don Baker is a CIA agent in this. He was the private investigator in Cape Fear, the completely inept private investigator that you and I really appreciated, Mike.
I love that guy.
We also have Famke Janssen, played Jean Grey in the original X-Men series as one of the main James Bond villains of this film. And she's like a Black Widow kind of character. She's really good in this film. Really loved her character. I'm trying to find what her name is really. Xenia Onatop. I'm probably not even pronouncing it right. But this film also, because it's a film of the 90s, it's post-Cold War era, but it's all about, the fracturing of the Soviet Union and different factions of the Soviets trying to assume power and lead the post-Soviet era Russia kind of thing, and even maybe regain that glory. So this film also has like kind of a timely element to it in the villain. And like there's threats of nuclear war, which is something that's actually relatively common in the films, because there is an element of nuclear weaponry in Goldfinger as well. This movie has really good comic timing. It's probably much more fast-paced than a lot of the other James Bond. Not saying that the other James Bond movies aren't fast-paced, because actually they relatively are, comparatively to other films of their eras. This film is definitely the one that has the most cheesy lines. Like, think Arnold Schwarzenegger like lines. Like, they're all very memorable. They're all used very well throughout the film. So there's so much as a 90s kid to just love about this film.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Hopefully
exactly.
not that bad, but some maybe.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I really love this one. So one aspect that I didn't talk about in Goldfinger that's true across all of the James Bond movies is all of them have like very over the top like singing intro credits where they have like original songs and it'll be like this cool montage or something. This one's the weirdest one out of all three. The song is really good, like musically, and it's sung by Tina Turner and she does a great job, but the lyrics are just an absolute like mess. Like it's a weird story that they're telling in the song, so I'd recommend listening to it because Jess and I were just laughing throughout.
Yeah.
There's also a character in this movie who dies like 12 times. Like every time, like they should have died like 12 times throughout this movie, and I just kept like saying it like they'd be dead there. They'd be dead there. And like and it got to the point where like Jess and I were just like yelling at the TV, dead. So we had a lot of fun with this one. This is I can't recommend going and checking out Goldeneye enough if you haven't seen it in a long time. And like you said, Jason, it also spawned one of the greatest or one of the most revered video games of all time.
Yeah, that video game was absolutely amazing on the N64. I had so much fun playing that. That's like where the love for 007 I think exists for a lot of guys or a lot of people our age.
Right.
Is like that video game makes you want to be like, oh, I should actually watch all 27 sometime. I did also see that like computer graphics were used to create the first gun barrel opening. Like that was the first film to use CGI. Also, this is the first, like Goldeneye is the first completely original James Bond movie without reference to Ian Fleming's novels.
Yes, and a lot of it, I think, again, becomes a response to the films of the 80s and 90s and the way that action and thrillers were trending. And like I said, it's really good. It's really entertaining. It's a movie that I would really recommend watching.
Awesome. I'm down to rewatch that.
Also, I'll say as well is that I have seen other Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies, and I gotta say that none of them hold a candle to this one. This is his first outing. It's by far the best. I feel like.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I'm not the biggest James Bond fan, but I always forget that he was James Bond.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. It never really sunk in with me that he was James Bond.
I just remember him with Halle Berry in one of the other ones, and like I'll always remember him as that James Bond because of the video game. So that's the only reason I would have like remembered, basically.
Yeah, I think this one is maybe slightly underrated in the James Bond filmography. I believe a lot of the movie lists have it around number 7, number 5 through 7 oftentimes, but I gotta say I had the most fun with this one. I really genuinely enjoyed it.
I'm seeing it at number 10 now because some of the new ones have bumped.
Right, correct.
Bumped up.
Oof.
Yeah, but like I said, don't sleep on this one. It's so much fun. We've got even like an appearance of Sean Bean in it, who dies
in the first like few minutes.
Yeah, like what more can you ask for than Sean Bean dying in a film?
It's a good property when Sean Bean eats it.
Yeah.
What if we invite Sean Bean on the podcast and he dies mid-recording?
Literally.
Yeah, that would just take everything full circle.
That would make us famous, and people would be like, this has to be a good podcast then.
Yeah, exactly.
We should have Sean Bean on this podcast and have him inexplicably like die on camera, like be our only camera episode ever, and then just like never bring it up again. Like he just disappears from the episode, and we're just like, and there goes Sean Bean. He's gone.
And there goes Sean Bean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, no, it'll be like Doki Doki Literature Club, where like
Literature chub.
it'll be. Let me try that again. It'll be like, wow, where's my head today? It'll be like Doki Doki Literature Club, where like the podcast will then just reset with him not there, and none of us bring it up.
Yeah.
It's just like, By the way, spoilers for Doki Doki Literature Club.
Whatever the fuck that is.
Blake knows. I made him play it.
You did unfortunately make me play it.
Okay. You did guess one of the next ones. If I'll give you another guess. It's 1990. And
Yeah,
this
Dances
was,
with Wolves.
yeah. This is like one of his absolute best like best received. It's a long movie.
It is a long movie. It's
I
like
watched-
3 hours, right?
I watched the extended cut, 3 hours 56 minutes.
Jesus Christ. That's like Gone with the Wind length.
Yeah, I watched it on like 1.5 to 2 times, like 2x speed. So that I could because I thought we were going to be filming that day. So I woke up at 8 in the morning on Sunday or on Saturday morning Saturday morning so that I could watch 2 movies.
So you tried to speed run Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, I think it worked. Overall, it's a really good movie. It's one of his best acting roles. I don't think it's like I have to watch the other movies, but I think like this is his best that everyone knows. I think A Perfect World and like a few other ones actually like vie for top like of his best acting roles so far. Dances with Wolves. He is a Civil War soldier, and it's at the beginning of, well, not the beginning. There's still a little bit of wild left in America, and he is. It starts off pretty like fast with introduction to him on the front lines, and he's been like blown up. His legs bleeding like crazy. He's in the medical tent, and they're like, we're gonna have to cut off your leg. And then the doctor's like, I need to smoke first though. And then he leaves the room, and then Kevin Costner puts on his boot and just walks back to the front line. And when he gets there, it's a stalemate, complete standoff. They like put a like a helmet on a stick, and then it gets shot, and like same with the other side. And then his like the one guy above him was like the major. He's trying to show to the general that he's actually trying to do something, but the general's like it's just a shit show. Nobody's actually doing anything.
Right. Because he's out on like the final frontier basically, and like Kevin Costner just essentially gets sent out to like, you know, run this new village, but there's nobody there when he gets there, right?
Yeah, so that's just after this scene where like this original scene sets it off, where basically he goes out into the middle of this stalemate on his horse and just runs like the whole length of the other side's line, and they're just trying to fire. They're firing everything they have at him, and he makes it like all the way to the end completely unharmed, and then somebody's like, I bet you can't do that again. And then he does it again, and the whole time he's like his arm, like he's just floating on this horse.
Oh my god.
But like, so like the quote,
it's a really great scene. I will say
Yeah,
that's one of like the highlight scenes of the film.
yeah, and that's why I'm kind of spending a little bit of time on it right now, because it really sets up like where he was.
Like almost kind of suicidal. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, like after he is in that suicidal spot, he's like, in trying to bring about my own death, I was granted a horse and freedom to go wherever I want to, any military station, and he was elevated to a living legend status.
Wow.
So like everyone in the military knew who he was. And then they're like, where do you want to go? You could go like somewhere super chill. You could go to like a city and like live live well. You can have your own farm, like something like that, whatever. He's like, no, send me to the frontier. It's the last frontier. I don't know exactly in which state, but it's like there's still wild land in America. Mm-hmm. So he goes to this outpost. Everyone had abandoned that outpost, and he basically gets there and is like fuck it, this is exactly what I came here for, to live off the land, live like to experience this. So he just cleans up the whole place. They left it like horrible. The guy who brings him there gets shot by one tribe of natives or indigenous peoples. So nobody ends up knowing that he's there. Nobody out of the military knows that he's there.
Right. They forget about him. They just lose him.
Yeah. When he's leaving to go to from the nearest city to there, his like commander that signs off on his orders to go there, as soon as he is half a block away, he hears him shoot himself in a very funny.
Crazy.
Yeah. He's
Jesus.
crazy. He's drunk and crazy, and so nobody knows that he wrote these orders. So, anyways, he's out there. It's just him, and then a wolf trots up to his near him and is like just watching him for like days, and then eventually feeds him some food. He has all these rations, enough for like a full company of men that are supposed to be there. They all left. So he has some bacon and throws it out and becomes friends with Wolf. But the real meat of the story is his interactions then with the Sioux tribe that is closest to him, and they are currently in a bad spot because the buffalo haven't showed up this year, and so they're all quite hungry. And so yeah,
it's a really touching story, honestly.
It really is.
It's one of, there is some negative thoughts about the movie because it's white savior kind of movie, but
and
at the same time, the indigenous people are shown in a pretty decent light in this film. I this is one of my favorite indigenous centered films.
If you really break it down, it's technically there's not really any white savior stuff going on, because he's not actually he doesn't help them that much. He gives them a few things, teaches shows them some interesting things. He has a coffee grinder, and he gives them some guns when they need them, but they are teaching him what life should be like, and he eventually melds right in, and he doesn't become their leader or anything like that. It's he just enjoys life with them. And so that's where the white savior trope, or it can be applied, but you have to look at it deeper to really get to the meat of it. Is it or not? There's a debate there, but
yeah, and I agree with you because having seen this film already myself, that's what I went in thinking because that's what I'd heard. But I feel like that's an idea that people have who haven't seen the movie and don't understand the full context of it. Exactly. But I would recommend this movie wholeheartedly. I think that it was fantastic. I will watch it again in my lifetime, absolutely. The one thing I'll say, actually, about my experience with it is I thought Kevin Costner's reading, because he narrates the film really heavily, because he's writing letters back, presumably at some point when somebody goes to actually find him and picks up his letters, but he's often reading them out. I found his reading of those somewhat hollow. Is the only negative thing I'll say about the film. But that's it.
Harrison Ford in Blade Runner hollow.
More like Forrest Gump in Forrest Gump.
That's monotone. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You can pull something out of that and say it's him remembering in a very hollow way. He remembers it as if it's been ripped away from him, and he's compartmentalized that. That's what I would say. To be devil's advocate, to say it was good, but it wasn't necessarily that good.
Right. That's the only negative that I'll say about the film. Otherwise, I absolutely loved it. I really would recommend it. I'm sure it sounds like you really had a lot of fun with it as well.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to do A Perfect World instead of this, but I ended up doing this, and I'm glad I did, because it is as good as it says it is. Everything that you know about it, it's that good. It's not absolutely amazing.
Did it win the Oscar that year?
It did win an Oscar.
It did win an Oscar. It won 7 Oscars, actually, not just one.
Oh, okay.
No,
54 wins and 98 total nominations. It's the top-rated movie 250 on IMDb.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, like that's that. Basically, I wanted to watch Waterworld, and then I saw like the other list of movies, and I was like, man, this guy was actually really good in his prime, and just like shit happened, and he fell off a little bit. But like he was at one point like the king of like for the early
Absolutely.
90s. Like he was the top tier actor at
Yeah.
that time.
I very much agree.
And like this solidified him with that as well. And like the filming was really good, like all the sets and everything. The costumes are one thing. Actually, there are like historical inaccuracies with the indigenous costumes that were used.
Yeah.
I forget her name.
You're talking about the woman.
Yeah, Mary McDonnell. Her
Yeah.
character stands with a fist up her butt. Just kidding. Sorry.
That stays in.
That is firmly out.
I know that's the only thing that brought me out of this movie was when she said her name, and I was like, obviously, I thought ridiculously
Why
immature
would
jokes.
you not?
Right,
yeah.
right. Was no PA like, guys, like, maybe we should change this.
Did you listen to the movies that I've talked about?
Yeah, fair enough. Pussy galore.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, her acting wasn't Oscar level, I don't think. Like, and the fact that this movie won over Goodfellas is a little bit.
It's a crime.
Ooh.
It's not a crime because it's damn good and it deserves it.
Yes.
But like, if you're looking at like an amazing emotional, like a moving movie, this is more moving than Goodfellas. But Goodfellas
Yeah.
is like it's.
Goodfellas is much more unconventional.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably the more inventive of the two.
Absolutely.
exactly.
it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where like the more original story should win, but this is much more Oscar worthy according to the Oscars and everything, the awards that come with all of that and everything.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me why this would win more awards than Goodfellas, but you know, I know for a fact Goodfellas is in the top 3 my favorite movies of all time. I'm pretty sure, Jason, that it's up there for you as well.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's far behind even in your list, Mike.
I enjoyed it quite a lot.
And for me, like, you know, Dances with Wolves probably makes my top 100 list, but I don't think it's in the top 30 of my favorite movies of all time. It was good.
Yeah.
It was really good. Like, really good.
Yeah, it might be in my top 250 at the 250 spot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just like, but yeah. So, what I will say is, I really did enjoy seeing these big Native American actors that like I feel like I've seen them a million times
Yes.
because they are those guys and they're in like other like really enjoyable roles as well. So like Graham Greene was Kicking Bird, who was Kevin Costner in this movie is like his name in the movie is Dances with Wolves, indigenous in the Sioux language, but they became like buddies first. They like Kicking Bird brought him into the tribe, and then Wind in His Hair became his actual like best friend, and that is like the quote that like when you're watching the movie, that's where you cry because Wind in His Hair as John Dunbar or Dances with Wolves is leaving to like protect the rest of the tribe at the end of the movie. Wind in His Hair just like I have to get the exact quote because it's damn good.
I love how you said that Dances with Wolves goes to, you know, save the tribe as all white saviors should.
Yeah.
He's
Wait
he's only
a second here.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
You
there's-
tried to
there's-
pull a fast one on me.
It's not perfect.
No,
This
no,
movie is not
no.
perfect in that sense.
He's not saving them from anything but himself. He is the most notorious person in the frontier now, so he can't stay with them because he will bring about their doom.
Because
Even
he's
though
just so awesome that other people are going to show up.
Yeah, and that's an interesting part of this film as well, right? Because there's an inevitability to this film, and there's a bit of a tragedy in that, right? In that, that we know that eventually that these people are going to be displaced.
Yeah. That's like they really play that well. The writing was very good on that. Oh, okay. So, Wind in His Hair yells out, "Dances with Wolves. I am Wind in His Hair. Do you see that I'm your friend? Can you see that you will always be my friend?" And like he repeats that, and it was just like heart wrenching because he was such a part of their tribe. They accepted him like he was no longer like a white man to them. He was family, and of course, because it's an Oscar movie, but. But it was they played it very well, and you actually felt something like true there. Yeah, so that's I guess where I'll leave that.
Cool.
Mike,
you want to hit us up with a couple more quotes?
Sure, I got two
Get
more.
Us hopefully closer here to whatever the hell you picked.
I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I'll just say none of you have got it yet. Neither of you have got it yet.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So here's quote number 1, or I guess quote number 5. Our job is simple. Break the code, solve the crime. And now number 6. In the heat of the investigative pursuit, the shortest distance between 2 points is not necessarily a straight line.
So it's a crime, and it's like a procedural crime.
Maybe, who knows?
Huh.
This is that last quote reminds me of like Inception, where they like fold the planet over so they could get to the. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that reminds me of another show or movie that I've watched recently, but I can't remember. And I don't think it's it. But man, you're really throwing us for a loop here.
Okay, you know what? When I tell you what it is, you're gonna like slap yourselves on the forehead. Okay.
It's definitely Rush Hour.
It's Rush Hour. You got it. It's not Rush Hour.
It's that movie that is always in the background of The Simpsons. It's not The Simpsons. It's the actual
the McBain thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
MacGruber, MacGyver. He did MacGyver and MacGruber.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I was thinking, what if I just did a fake TV show and told you guys all about it and like made up a bunch of actors? Like, how long can I keep that going before you guys caught me?
That would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
Because I feel like once you say some things, I'm gonna look it up. So you'd also have to create some websites and stuff.
This would be like a
100%.
Nathan For You level con.
That would be amazing.
All right. I think it's me, right?
It's you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one last James Bond film to do, and keeping with my theme, I did a new Bond, a new era of Bond, and there's only really one James Bond actor and era left that we haven't talked about chronologically, and that's the Daniel Craig 2000s James Bond.
Ooh.
And so what I went with was, again, the obvious one, the Casino Royale from 2006.
Nice.
It's a movie that I haven't seen since it's come out, even though I own the DVD of it. I don't know that I was a massive fan of it at that time. I will say it's grown on me a lot since then. Daniel Craig plays James Bond at the beginning of his career. So to note, Casino Royale was a novel of Ian Fleming's. It's actually James Bond's first novel. It's his origin story, essentially.
Ooh.
And so not only does this film... is it essentially a reboot of the franchise again, but it's also a origin story in a way of James Bond seen differently than in comparison GoldenEye at an earlier part in James Bond's career. So at the beginning of the film, James Bond doesn't even have his 00 status yet, not actually an MI6 agent. And that's something he gets. And so what I'll say about this film is, again, sticking with the times, this film is a very serious film. Like the mid 2000s was a very serious time. Think The Dark Knight, which comes out 2 years later. I think The Dark Knight actually is a film that shares a lot with something like Casino Royale because it's dark. It's very grounded in reality. The big bad of Casino Royale isn't some crazy evil genius or some, Nazi adjacent figure or some Soviet figure person. It's a banker who is funding terrorism, essentially.
Huh.
And the film is kind of centered around terrorist organizations and how they operate.
And Mads Mikkelsen just killed it.
Was
Yes.
that Mads Mikkelsen?
Yeah.
It was Mads
Oh.
Mikkelsen in Casino Royale.
I don't remember
With
that.
his like, didn't his eye bleed or
Yes,
something?
he had a bleeding eye because I won't get into too much of all those details, but yeah, he's a pretty good villain in this. Again, like Goldfinger had the best villains of the three, but he does a pretty good job with what he's got. And like I said, it's a much more grounded film. It's grittier. Like there's not even close to as much comedy or like quippy one-liners. James Bond himself is so much more serious than the other ones, like and so much more sure of himself. For example, this is so early in his career that I think that what Daniel Craig was going for was just, a younger guy who was just invincible or felt invincible. And so it's really interesting because this film really tears James Bond apart and really like rips away all of that ego and all of that like I'm the best, and it just leaves him with like a shell of who he becomes later on, essentially.
So it's your late 20s, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And he plays it, he like executes on it really well, and it makes him a very interesting James Bond to watch because of that. Whereas, like I said, Pierce Brosnan being an older James Bond, like I said, he doesn't feel invincible anymore. Same thing with
Sean Connery.
Sean Connery as well. Like Sean Connery is kind of a goofball a little bit. Like he's suave, but he's also like a goofball, and there are times when it's like he almost like lucks his way through things. Like things just kind of happen and he's just like, okay, I'll just go with it.
Sean Connery kind of seemed like he was having a good time. Like, well, maybe not a good time, but
there's I think every James Bond actor at some point has enough of playing the character, and I think right around the time of Goldfinger is when he starts to lose interest in the character.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Didn't Sean
Yeah.
Connery hate playing James Bond?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, you get these actors who play these iconic roles, and it turns out they actually hate them.
I was just watching who's the guy who plays Better Call Saul?
Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah. He was saying like it was so hard to stay in that role in that guy's mind the whole time that it like messed with him. Not saying that James Bond is the same, but like any
That's
of those
interesting.
roles, it's like you can't wait for it to be over because it takes a toll.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And this film, not only does it take a toll on Daniel Craig, but like I said, it really takes a toll on who James Bond is at this particular moment in time,
Right.
which is really fascinating. And the other thing that I'll say about this film is, like I said, with GoldenEye, these films in this era of James Bond and subsequent to, the Sean Connery OG, like each film series feels like a response to the trends of the time, the movie trends of the time. This feels like a direct response to like the Mission Impossible series and Jason Bourne especially.
Oh, I
Like-
forgot about those movies.
Yeah, so they're very, very serious in comparison. And there's a lot less like crazy gadgets in this one as well.
And he also gets like beat the fuck up,
Yeah,
which
that's what
is not like a not common thing for other Bond movies.
He also beats the fuck out of people. Like,
Yeah.
it's less silly.
like yeah, that's exactly it. And like I said, like there's an invincibility that is lost eventually in this film. It's a really interesting movie, and I would highly recommend it. Like I said, it's my second favorite of the three that I watched. Like GoldenEye just is special to me in the sense of like where it fits into film history, I think, and what it's trying to do. But what I'll say is, like, out of all the James Bond, this one, cinematography, like set, location, like this film is cool. Like this film just oozes charisma and like charm. Like not necessarily charm, but it just, it's so fascinating. We're flying out to the
badass.
Bahamas. Yeah, we're going to Monte Carlo to play Texas Hold'em, which is at that particular time like peak poker in the world kind of thing. It's beautiful. It's so bright. It's so like well shot. Like it's we're in Venice for the last act of the film. Like, just everything is so cool and so like awesome.
I just saw a clip randomly that where Mads Mikkelsen was talking about the movie, and he was basically like, everyone else on the set, they played poker, they understood poker, they loved poker. Like Mads Mikkelsen is really good at poker. Daniel Craig did not know a single thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what this film does a good job of as well is it does a pretty good job of explaining how Texas Hold'em works while you're playing it, and not in like a really explainy kind of way necessarily. It didn't feel like at times, like it wasn't too bad. Like, you know, it also explained stock trading because that was a really relevant time at that period in time as well. And how that relates to Le Chivre, Mads Mikkelsen's character, and how he does the banking for the terrorist organizations. It's just such a film of its time. Like, it's so interesting. It's so 2006. Like, I don't know another film other than like The Dark Knight that would describe the mid 2000s. Really,
It really was kind of a brooding time, wasn't it?
it really was.
Yeah.
And this film, like, it doesn't even have like the scene where they go into the tech room and see all the latest crazy gadgets. Like, that's not in here. What I'll say is the opening song is hands down my favorite of the three that we listened to, because it's Chris Cornell singing, and Chris Cornell is one of my favorite voices in rock and roll. Rip Chris Cornell, but it's really, really good. The Bond woman in this film is Vesper Lind, played by
Ava Green,
who's absolutely gorgeous in this film. Judi Dench is firing on all cylinders, and it's really great. And what I'll say to kind of wrap things up with this is that these three films, especially GoldenEye and Casino Royale, really lend to the idea of James Bond being a code name, 007 being a status rather than a person. And a lot of that is tied into Judi Dench, in my opinion, because like Judi Dench at times in this film is like, I've dealt with your predecessors before and the ridiculous shenanigans they've had, and like, I'm not going to do it with you, kind of thing. And like, there's a lot of banter between the two of them, even when Judi Dench appears in GoldenEye, and, you know, she's the new person in town, the new sheriff in town, and how that kind of conflicts with the old kind of style of M16 and the old style of James Bond. Like, there's a lot of cool connections between GoldenEye and Casino Royale in that sense. So they kind of work well together as a film series. So yeah, you should really go check this one out. I know that the rest of the Daniel Craig films are all relatively well regarded. I think the second one in the series is probably the weakest one out of the 3 or 4 that he's in.
Quantum of Solace.
That's the only other one of Daniel Craig's that I watched, because I think at that point is when, you know, like I said, Casino Royale at the time didn't really connect with me, and it connects with me a lot more now that I'm seeing it and understanding it more, because I was a kid at that point too, right? Like, I didn't understand it as a kid the same way, especially looking back at that time period of human history, why it was so relevant in that particular moment in time. But it is a really, really good movie. Very, very good movie.
Daniel Craig kind of got screwed over in his career because I think there was a writer's strike and COVID, both like 2 separate instances where like there should have been another movie in between either Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, or like the next 2. So like we kind of got robbed of a potential other like amazing movie.
Did we though? Because I mean, thinking about it now, he was James Bond for 15 years. Like, he was James Bond for 5 movies. Like, that's a pretty solid run.
So my understanding as well is that Daniel Craig was also not a big fan of playing James Bond as well, and was looking to get out.
Oh, jeez.
Way earlier.
Nobody has a good time with that role.
Yeah, but it's also because the second movie got screwed over by the writing. Like, that would obviously make the experience worse for him.
I guess that would kill your enthusiasm a bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well.
So yeah, I would absolutely recommend it. It's a fascinating film. It's definitely the best made film. Daniel Craig, to the generation below us, is definitely going to be, you know, most familiar with this style of James Bond than any of the other ones, right? But it's well worth your time. It's a really cool rewatch in 2023.
Okay.
I'd
Cool.
rewatch it. Yeah. All right. So I actually have. I remember the thing that I was trying to say earlier that didn't make any sense. So both Die Hard and James Bond are linked to this next movie. So
Cool.
Sean Connery is in it,
Mhm.
and Alan Rickman.
Ooh.
Which movie is this?
You already said it.
Harry Potter.
No, it's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Oh, it was
Okay,
Robin
yeah,
Hood.
yeah,
I
yeah,
guessed
yeah.
it right earlier.
Yeah, you got all
Nice.
three.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. You
I
just
guess I know my Kevin Costner.
Yeah, you do. And man, this was so fun. Kevin Costner is like the worst part of this movie, and he's not that bad. Like
What a
a
ringing
re-
endorsement.
Yeah.
Although I heard
Exactly.
Alan Rickman steals every scene that he's in.
everything.
I mean, it's Alan
everything.
Rickman, right?
Yeah, and it's Alan Rickman unleashed because he didn't really want to be in this, but he wanted something to separate him a little bit from Die Hard, which was that 1990?
I think it was 1988 or
88?
1978, 1987, maybe 89. I think it was
88
89.
sounds familiar.
I want to say 89. 88.
It's
okay.
88.
Okay, so that was like his last huge thing, obviously, and like that's
And his
what
first huge thing.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone knew him as the villain. I forget his name.
Hans Gruber.
Hans Gruber, of course.
Hans Gruber.
Yeah, so that's why he took this, and like he negotiated basically, I want to write all my own shit for this. He got the script and he's like, this is a boring character. Give me the freedom to write this. And he had like a friend of his help him do it. I didn't find out who that was.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so all of the like great lines come from him. All of the like craziness of the movie, like the fun parts are like all centered around him. He is the sheriff of Nottingham. Watching this, it brought back all of like the Robin Hood storylines and characters and stuff like that. So that like you eventually meet Little John and Friar Tuck and Marion, and like there's a lot of characters where I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm thinking back and I start to remember them, mostly from what's that like cartoon version of Robin Hood?
Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Are you talking about Rocket
Not Men in
Robin Hood?
Tights.
Like
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Rocket Robin Hood. It used to air on Teletoon.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I know the characters from mostly. And then there have been quite a few iterations of Robin Hood, most recently with the guy who was in Vikings.
Charlie
and
Hunnam.
Yeah, it was horrible. No, he wasn't.
Oh.
Yeah, Charlie Hunnam, wrong guy. They look similar.
Do you guys
Yeah.
remember the Russell Crowe Robin Hood by Ridley Scott?
Yes, also not good.
I don't remember a single
I have that
god-
on DVD, and it is just so boring. It's so boring.
I just remember there's the bald guy who's very obviously the villain, and like there's a scene later in the movie where they're like, oh, that guy's evil, and I'm like, really?
Yeah, the newest one was King Arthur: Legend of the Sword, which oh wait, am I completely mixing this up?
You
I
might
am.
be.
I think I am.
Yeah.
Yes, King Arthur and Robin Hood, different
Different
legends.
guys. Different guys.
but also have been done many times. Anyways,
Yes.
this Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, like it started off a little serious, where Robin Hood's in jail and like, he was just fighting the he was in the Crusades, and the Crusades went horribly.
Yeah, not a good time.
No. And so he was in jail for like 4 or 5 years or something like that with his best friend and all his, like he had a whole crew and everything that came over with him. And he escapes with Morgan Freeman is a character named Azim, and they become great friends, but they escape with his other best friend, his childhood best friend, and his childhood best friend dies in his arms, and it's like all super sad. But then he comes back to England and he just turns into like a fun fool character, and he has the worst English accent. Kevin Costner like could not pull this off, and I think even Morgan Freeman's accent was like kind of not that great. But
But it's Morgan Freeman, so you kind of give him a pass.
You're
Yeah,
like, all right.
Yeah, and he was a great character. I forget what they call him. Amur.
Achu?
No, his name's Azim.
Sorry, that was a Men in Tights joke.
Right.
For a second, I was like, "Whoa, Blake, seeing a different side to you tonight."
When was that
Dave
one?
Chappelle.
When was
Robin Hood Men in Tights
1993.
Yeah.
So 2 years after this one. So like
Okay.
this was like the first one where it was like a really fun character, I think. But yeah, sorry, I was saying that Morgan Freeman is Azim, who's a Moorish man. He's Muslim, and like he has this like big curved sword. He was a really cool character. But man, the Sheriff of Nottingham was just like Alan Rickman was so good. And I watched the extended cut for this as well.
Nice.
And his mother was basically cut out of the scene, but she's like a witch who can see the future and everything. And we find out later that she was just spying on him through these holes in the walls to figure out how to make it seem like she was predicting the future.
Nice.
And you see like the whole band get together. They live in the forest while the Sheriff of Nottingham is basically reigning over England, and he's bringing in all this power and stuff. They start robbing from him and the other rich people and giving it to the poor, and they like have a whole little village by the end, like a whole army.
Yeah, your standard Robin Hood tale.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
Just with some really great performances. And
Yeah.
some not so great
Accents.
accents.
Yeah. And so like one of the best lines was from Alan Rickman, and he was like yelling at Robin at one point. He's like, "I'm gonna cut your heart out with a spoon." And then his this next scene, he has this cousin who's like a shitty, like evil little like wormy rat-tailed cousin kind of thing. And he's like, "When you said you were gonna cut his heart out with a spoon, why? Like, why would you cut it? Why wouldn't you use an axe or a blade?" And he's like, "Because it's dull, you twit." And it was in that like Alan Rickman voice. It was so fucking perfect. Overall, there's not that much to talk about this. It was a good movie. It was really fun. It wasn't great, but it's worth a watch, especially if you want to see Alan Rickman like free.
Okay.
That's definitely a movie that I want to check out at some point because I have heard great things, especially about Alan Rickman's performance with it. It's a movie that's on our list to check out for fantasy at some point for sure, or medieval kind of films. I do want to say one more thing about Casino Royale. I was just thinking about before we get to Mike, your grand reveal.
I have been sitting so patiently this whole time.
The last thing I'm going to say about Casino Royale is that it feels like a better step in the right direction for the female characters in the film. Like,
Yeah.
you know, M is a great step in the right direction as Judi Dench as M in GoldenEye and then in Casino Royale. But Ava Green's character plays like an equal in Casino Royale, essentially. And you know, there are parts in it where they maybe make some decisions that, you know, people might not necessarily love, but they're consistent with the character. But I thought Ava Green's performance in it is fantastic and is like really, really a step in the right direction for the James Bond series.
Yeah, even the newest James Bond, the female characters were very badass as well, and like on the same level. I have to say one more thing about Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Sean Connery came in at the very end as King Richard coming back, and like Robin just saved the day and he got the girl and he's at his wedding, and Sean Connery just comes up and like it's at the point where Friar Tuck is marrying them and he's like, "You may now kiss the bride," or no, it's you know, when people are like, "If you want to interrupt this," you know, that line.
If anyone has any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, he just comes in with that great like Scottish accent and he's like, "I object unless you will let me give her away," and it's like, yeah. So he just comes in at the very end.
Cool.
That is kind of funny. Although I have to say, as a man, that's the last person you want to see at your wedding is Sean Connery. You're like, oh shit.
And he came in like very intimidating at first, and then it was all laughy, funny, like whatever.
That's pretty funny.
Nice.
All right,
All
let's
right.
do this.
All right, I'm going to take us home, and I'm a little tired, so I may breeze through this a bit. So I can't believe neither of you two got it.
Give us some really good hints and like.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you one. I'm gonna give you the most famous quote, and let's see if you guys can get it. Let me
Okay.
just make sure I got it correctly. You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. It's Twin Peaks.
Oh,
It's Twin Peaks.
Nice.
I don't know
Yeah.
anything about Twin Peaks.
David
Okay,
Fincher, right?
David Lynch.
David Lynch.
Blake's favorite director. So, what do you take when you take overblown soap opera melodrama, police procedural, a small town setting, Kyle MacLachlan, and one of the weirdest human beings to ever live? You get Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
So, the whole premise of the first season is, again, this is like, it's drama, but also horror, and there's a detective element, but there's also kind of, this was in 1990, and there was a bunch of big soap operas or like primetime melodramas on TV at the time. Like, I think Dallas was probably the biggest one. David Lynch just rode into town and just really, really made one of the weirdest 7 episodes of television of all time. And like, you have to think about what, like, if Twin Peaks came out now, it would be fun, but like, you have to remember the time period this came out in, right? This was pre-peak TV. So like, the whole idea of like, we're gonna do these genre bending conventions, we're gonna tell this weird story, and we're gonna have a bunch of like really distinguished actors show up too. Like, that had never really been done before. Like, my mom still remembers when Twin Peaks was airing and just everybody was talking about it, right? The whole premise of the first season is Laura Palmer, the homecoming queen, has just been found dead, and nobody knows who did it. So Kyle MacLachlan plays Special Agent Dale Cooper, who comes to town to try to figure out what's going on. And because David Lynch is at the helm, a lot of really weird shit happens. So,
Probably.
yeah. And Dale Cooper himself, played by Kyle MacLachlan, is one of the like kookiest detectives of all time. Like, he's really good at his. I should ask, have either of you guys seen it at all?
No, I've
Okay.
never seen Twin Peaks. It is on my list to check out at some point because it is a very, very famous TV series.
I know you're not a huge David Lynch fan, Blake, but you would probably really like it.
So you say that, and I guess, looking at his filmography, I actually haven't seen any David Lynch other than his original Dune, which he essentially
Okay.
disowned.
Yeah.
So
Probably in terms of movies, the one that's the closest to the tone of the show would probably be like Blue Velvet, I think.
and he's the guy who did Eraserhead and Elephant Man. He's kind of like similar to Felici, what's his name?
Federico Fellini.
Federico Fellini, and that I discussed why I didn't like his films and why I don't like those kind of films in general, and that's kind of what he's known for, is making
Really,
those deep
really
psychological
weird shit. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
artsy kind of things.
Well, the first season of Twin Peaks, anyways, is pretty. I feel like he had to rein himself in because he was on network TV. Now, what's tragic about Twin Peaks is that it had a really promising 7-episode first season, and then a bunch of things went wrong in the second season. I don't want to go into it too much, but it's kind of. So the whole deal is you don't really find out who killed Laura Palmer at the end of the first season. And yeah, spoilers. And David Lynch and his writing partner, Mark Frost, kind of deliberately left it vague. Like, the whole idea was they never really wanted to answer that. And I mean, that sounds weird if you're just listening to me gab on about it right now and you don't know anything about the show. But the show really does kind of become an ensemble. Like, it's almost like a Stephen King. It's almost like Salem's Lot in the sense that
Ooh.
it becomes a story about the town itself, right?
Right.
Like, it's again, it's very David Lynchian in the sense that, like, it seems like this really happy-go-lucky small town where everything's cool, but like, as the show progresses, you find out all the dark secrets everyone's hiding. Like,
Also, like Needful Things by Stephen King.
also like Needful Things. Like, there's a lot of affairs going on. There's a lot of conspiracies and like backroom politics. Like, it's very interesting. So anyways, again, spoilers. They do resolve who killed Laura Palmer kind of partway through the second season. And again, it was apparently more of an executive meddling situation where the executives are like, well, you need to answer that question. And David Lynch and Mark Frost didn't want to, and then their relationship soured. So their season 2 still has its defenders, but it's kind of universally accepted that it kind of ratings kind of tanked pretty hard in the second season. So I guess the studio or the production company had greenlit a third season, but because season 2 did so poorly, or at least underperformed, they decided not to do a third season, but they gave David Lynch the opportunity to do a movie. So that's where the 6 seasons in a movie comes in. So the movie is called Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And it's interesting because the whole story takes place because Laura Palmer, this homecoming queen, cheerleader, beautiful blonde girl, loved by everyone, etc., etc. Her death is what kicks off the series, right? But then again, as the series goes on, you find out that she had her own dark secrets and maybe had her own double life that she might have been living. But you don't really see much of Laura Palmer in the first 2 seasons. Like, she'll show up occasionally in flashbacks, but not really. So what's interesting is that the movie Fire Walk with Me is a prequel that shows the last 7 days of her life.
Huh.
Yeah.
So do you get the answer?
Well, it was kind of already revealed in the second season who killed Laura Palmer, but I would say I was trying to watch Fire Walk with Me from the perspective of someone who hadn't seen the first 2 seasons, like in the sense that, like, will this movie make sense if you're not already a Twin Peaks fan? And let me just put my cards on the table right now. This movie barely makes sense if you are a Twin Peaks fan. Like, this is where there's some real David Lynch shenanigans going on in this movie. Like, there's a scene where, like, Laura Palmer's mom kind of is sleeping and then she wakes up from a doze and, like, she looks at the end of her bed and there's nothing there. But then all of a sudden there's a white horse at the end of her bed and then the white horse vanishes and it's like, all right.
Did that happen?
No. And then Laura Palmer's mom was like, oh my God, I'm in a David Lynch movie.
Yeah.
Does she say that? Because that'd be hilarious.
No, but I would have loved that movie.
Did you watch the deleted scenes or, like, the full cut of Fire Walk with Me?
I didn't find out about the full cut until after the fact. I guess the full cut features a lot of scenes from returning cast members, but it was kind of deemed maybe a little too fan servicey at the time. So
Interesting.
From what I just looked up, it sounds like there's a lot of, like, you were saying it's like a lot's going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scenes that were cut. Everyone's like, why did they cut those? It would have made everything else make so much sense.
Watching the movie, there were moments where I was just like, a scene would end and I'd just be like, okay, like, I guess we're moving on. Like, so yeah, Twin Peaks, I really, really enjoyed the first season. I didn't get into the second season just because, again, I know it goes, I would like to watch it at some point. I feel like the movie almost kind of has an unpleasant task of trying to, it's a prequel. It shows the last 7 days of Laura Palmer's life. So it's got kind of the unpleasant task of, well, at the time, so Twin Peaks did come back in 2017 for a third season that was apparently did very well. But at the time, it really alienated critics and audiences, partly because, like, the show is actually really funny. Like, the show had some genuinely laugh out loud funny moments. The movie is kind of funny. Like, it has some great lines. Like, my favorite, I feel blank as a fart. But and it's interesting in the sense that you finally get a story from Laura Palmer's perspective, which is interesting. But let me just say, the last 7 days of her life were not pleasant. Like, I will put a content warning for depictions of sexual assault on this movie. It's not, if you're uncomfortable with that and you have every right to be, this movie is not a pleasant time. So also there's a lot of, like, if you're not into the lore of Twin Peaks with all the different, like, spoiler, but all the different, like let's just call them entities floating around the town, you're going to be really confused by different aspects of this movie.
What I find really interesting about this too is that something like Twin Peaks, it sounds like, it's especially the first season sounds like it's very well written, and it sounds like, there's a deep, rich history and lore, and the movie also kind of has an impossible task of fitting into that lore, right? And not like undoing anything that the show's done. And it's also, I find what's really interesting is a comparison to this is a lot of TV and movies will often show us something in society in like collapse or something, almost like, or society after the major events of something has happened. And I guess the biggest one, the most recent one that I can think of is Game of Thrones. Like the series of Game of Thrones takes place after the big war, and I can't remember what's the mother of dragons.
Daenerys Targaryen?
Yeah, the Targaryens. Like, it takes place after the Targaryens have been overthrown and after like all of these big events have happened, and it kind of like puts the show on this very interesting trajectory of everybody trying to pick up the pieces and vying for power. And it sounds almost like like that's what the first season of the show is trying to do, and then it basically like fills in all the details that are actually less interesting when shown maybe in a chronological order or in filling in a gap.
I think all prequels kind of have a thankless task in that, like, you're filling in backstory that the original material probably didn't need filled in. Mm-hmm. I mean, the classic example is the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Like, yes. Fuck you, fight me. Those movies are terrible.
No, I will say Revenge of the Sith is pretty damn good. Jess and I rewatched that
recently.
Last year.
Okay,
yeah.
I rewatched it a couple years ago, and I was like, what is this? But, I mean, there are good prequels. Like, Better Call Saul is still my all-time favorite TV show, which also stars Kevin Costner. But, nice. So anyways, no, I don't think the movie really did not do well when it came out, just because I think audiences just didn't know what to make of it. Critics were kind of baffled by it. And like hardcore Twin Peaks fans maybe wanted a more satisfying conclusion than they got in season 2, or they just wanted more Twin Peaks. And of course, David Lynch, being fucking David Lynch, just did whatever the hell he wanted. And but I will say it's gotten a reappraisal in recent years where people have come back and been like, okay, I think some people have argued it's one of David Lynch's best works. So take from that what you will.
And you didn't watch season 3 at all?
No, I did not. But apparently season 3 is a really, really good, despite taking place like 20 years later. Or 25 years later, actually. But, yeah, no. Also, David Bowie randomly shows up in the movie. Do you remember when we watched The Last Temptation of Christ and David Bowie was just Pontius Pilate for one season?
Yep.
Well, let me just break down. I'm just going to break this scene down just so you know what level this movie's on. There's a scene where, okay, David Lynch himself plays a FBI commander person, and he's got hearing aids, so he's always shouting at people because he can't hear. So literally the first scene in the movie is him just at his desk shouting orders at people, which I assume was probably just behind the scenes footage that they just spliced into the movie. But Kyle MacLachlan, Dale Cooper, he shows up and he's like, it's 10:10 on February 16th. And David Lynch's character is just looking at him, and Kyle MacLachlan's like, I had that weird dream the other night, remember? That's why I'm scared something terrible's going to happen. And then some weird shit happens, and then David Bowie just walks in, and everyone's like, oh, I forget what the character's name is, but they're like, David Bowie, you've been missing for years. What are you doing? And David Bowie just starts shouting some fucking David Lynchian nonsense. And there's all these crossfades to like the Red Room, which is like kind of this weird supernatural plane connected to Twin Peaks. And then the scene just ends and you're just sitting there like, what? So
weird.
Anyways, I'll say for the movie, I was never bored, but it's baffling in the way that only David Lynch can be baffling. So that's both a pro and a con.
Right.
But I do, actually, my roommate and I rewatched the first season of Twin Peaks last year, and we both really, really enjoyed it. Like, it it does really, really hold up.
Cool. Yeah,
So-
I've got to check it out. It's definitely on my list. I'm glad you did that one, actually.
Yeah, I haven't gone back and watched any old shows really, so I feel like I should start adding those into the rotation.
It's also just like, it's kind of like quaint, right? Like, so the movie Firewalk with Me shows the last 7 days of Laura Palmer's life, but the first 20 minutes is kind of like a prologue showing these two FBI agents investigating another murder, and like there's a scene where like somebody's car phone goes off, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, car phones. So, you know, it's kind of, oh, by the way, that scene, so these two FBI agents are just arresting these two women outside a school bus, and like all the children are screaming, like screaming and crying. Like, I guess the implication is like they're arresting the school bus drivers, and it's like the scene is never elaborated on. You never find out why.
Weird.
It's just a school
Nice.
bus full of shrieking children. So
He just wanted to do like fit weird imagery into his TV and movie, and found ways to include that stuff.
there's also a scene where like the two FBI agents go to a diner and they meet like, because they're investigating the murder of this waitress, and they meet like the surliest bitches. They meet the surliest, bitchiest old waitress there named Ruth, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna order some food." He's like, and she's like smoking a cigarette because it's the 90s, right? She's like, "You want to hear about our specials? We don't got any."
That sounded like a John Mulaney sketch.
Kinda, yeah. I think I might have had my baby Jay come out, but
Yeah.
anyways. Anyways, no, I'd recommend the show, and I'd even recommend the movie, despite how David Lynchian it is.
How would you watch it? Would you watch it season 1, season 2, movie season 3?
I see, I'm more of a casual Twin Peaks fan. Like, there is a lot of like lore and stuff. Like, I know there's been like, I think there was even something recently where like they took stock footage or unused footage from the show and the movie, and they like pieced together another feature-length movie out of it. So you'd have to, I mean, definitely start with season 1, obviously. And then, yeah, so season 2 reveals who killed Laura Palmer, and then the movie shows more of how it happened. So I would say probably 1, 2, then movie.
And then season 3 after?
Probably something like that, yeah. There's probably some Twin Peaks purists right now who are shaking their fists at me, but I'm doing my best, okay, guys? Jesus.
Cool.
Cool.
Kyle MacLachlan, actually, I watched him recently in Confess Fletch, which is a really funny movie. With basically, I describe it as John Hamm makes facial expressions at ridiculous things for an hour.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned that to me.
Aren't there a
Yeah.
few Fletch movies
There
over
are
the past?
Chevy
like-
Chase.
yeah,
did
yeah,
the
that's what
first
it was.
couple. I've seen both of the originals. The first one is like good, but in like an 80s kind of way. Like, I don't know that it holds up. The second one, not so good. Confess Fletch, I really like. Jess and I watched it and really
Interesting.
had a lot of fun. It like just John Hamm is like made for that role. He's actually a really, really funny actor, and he doesn't get as much credit as he deserves as a comedian.
Yeah, anything I've seen him in where he's being funny, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
I know Kyle MacLachlan as the captain on How I Met Your Mother, of
That's
course.
right. That's right.
Yes.
But-
yeah.
I also watched Desperate Housewives recently with Annabelle, and I somehow got sucked into it, and I was actually sucked in. Like, I get invested easily into many things, but he was creepy in that, so I see how he would fit kind of creepy as the detective.
I will let me just say, this is the last thing I'll say about Twin Peaks. He's delightful. Like, he's
Yeah.
Special Agent Dale Cooper, and he's just this really happy-go-lucky, really quirky guy. Like, he has he has a little like portable microphone, and he keeps leaving notes for somebody named Diane. And like, I won't spoil that, but like, and then like, he just loves coffee. Like, the famous quote from the show is like, "That is a damn fine cup of coffee." And like, he's always eating pie. Like, he's actually, he's charming. He's like really weird but charming.
Okay, weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, he kind of grounds the whole like town around himself, because he's sort of this outsider who like really falls in love with the town, and like he's brilliant but also just weird. Like, so yeah.
He what's funny is he basically plays the captain in Confess Fletch as well. So
Okay, so
there's
he's
like a connection to How I Met Your Mother and Fletch somehow.
I guess he's been typecast a little.
Yeah, and then he's Paul Atreides in the original Dune. So what are you gonna do, right?
I guess David Lynch just grabbed this guy off the shelf one day.
Pretty much,
and
yeah.
He's like, "You're with me."
As all good actor and director
Combos.
dynamics work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I think we have some really great stuff. I guess we should also say, we didn't say where Robin Hood Prince of Thieves is streaming. It's streaming on Crave Stars or Stars through Prime right now. Casino Royale you're going to have to go looking for because it's not streaming anywhere, but again, well worth a watch. I'm surprised none of the James Bond films are streaming anywhere, to be honest.
It's been weird lately with James Bond films and all the Netflix and like everyone's kind of fighting over them, but that they don't want it. Yeah, it's been weird lately.
Yeah.
This fucking writer's strike too, eh?
Ah, writers.
We had
They're
to
the
bring it
worst
up.
human beings on the planet.
No, it's like it's a good thing they're doing the stuff they're doing. I'm saying like fuck the executives and everything.
It's funny, like we are kind of like in the next 2 or 3 or 6 or whatever months, we're not gonna have new content. And then what do we do?
And that's our jobs at this point, is to
Yeah.
find all of the cool old stuff
Yeah.
from yesteryear that deserves your attention, like these fine films and TV shows, which Twin Peaks, I will say, is available to buy on Apple TV. And Twin Peaks, that's the new Twin Peaks, I think. Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me is on Criterion Channel, which is interesting that it's there.
It's kind of fucky how it's all scattered throughout all these different streaming services.
They make us want to scream.
They sure
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, and I think that is it. There's some good stuff. I've added a few to my collection here to watch.
Yeah, I love the draft. It's always fun.
Yeah, this one's like one of the highlights of the year, right? For the podcast.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what's next, this one's going to come out after a bit of a break. And let me check.
There's this one clip or one scene that if I could find the link, I'll send it to you guys. Of Robin Hood, where like Robin Hood's gotten away and Alan Rickman's like super pissed, and he like comes into his like witch's lair, and he's just like throwing stuff, and he just stabs a bunch of fruit that are on this like nice plate, and then the witch is like, something vexes you, and it's just like the perfect and like how pissed he, like his comedic acting, like his physical acting was just perfect in that moment.
That's really funny. Just describing that scene made me laugh out loud. So
Yeah, you have to watch this movie.
I'll probably
It's-
piss
it's-
myself.
It's definitely like an anytime watch. It's just
Okay.
like anytime that you're feeling like something fun.
What was your favorite Costner movie?
Out of these three, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I think was the best watch. I really did like both of the others, but I wouldn't watch Dances with Wolves again just because it's so long, and like
Yeah.
it is what it is. It's a like classic Oscar movie, and that's not what.
Yep.
So I really want to see A Perfect World. It's like him with Clint Eastwood. I think Clint Eastwood's actually acting in it too.
That's cool.
When does that guy ever act?
He's just being himself. Yeah. Clint Eastwood is actually acting in it as well.
Oh, wait. What was that movie just called?
A Perfect World.
I think I saw that like last year
Oh,
briefly.
it's got Laura Dern in it too.
Yeah, that's the movie where he like kidnaps a kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that movie.
Shit, now I wish I did Clint Eastwood, but like that would have been an obvious pick.
Yeah. You gotta go for the... Man, I remember next to nothing about that movie, though. So, I don't know how great it was.
Oh shit, I remember this because he has the Casper mask. Fuck, I've seen this back in the day.
Ah!
That's so funny.
Oh my god, I remember it.
The best movies are the ones you forget immediately.
Yeah, like I watched this on VHS.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
Shit, I should have watched it. And also, Field of Dreams. very good movie.
I
It's
remember
really
liking
fun.
it a lot. Yeah.
It's a like heartwarming movie, and he was
I
good.
don't know if I've ever seen Field of Dreams.
I'm down
gonna
for
put
a
that out
good,
there.
sentimental, heartwarming time every now and then.
If you
I'm
build
not.
it, they will come.
All right, let's end her there.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, thanks for listening. Next up, we've got Actor Actress Month, so kind of adjacent to Jason
Yeah.
Ooh.
and his movie draft experience. So looking forward to that. Last year we did Marilyn Monroe, and you and I had a lot of fun with that actually.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Some Like It Hot is fantastic.
That's a great movie.
Yeah,
That's one of my
and
favorites.
It was awesome to delve into an actress that nobody's actually watched their movies. Classically, like everyone has heard of her, but no one's sat down and watched them.
Yeah, so maybe we do something similar to that again, like Audrey Hepburn or something. I don't know. Sound off in the comments below if you're interested in seeing an old actress or actor.
Yeah.
Oui.
See you next time. Like, share, subscribe, tell your mom. I don't think I missed anything. Tell your dad.
Tell your dad.
There we
Yeah, especially your dad.
Share this with your father.
Yeah. Hi, Dad.
It'll be the deepest conversation you ever had.
Yes.
It's the only way you'll ever be able to express emotions with your father.
It's through
right.
movies.
Well, on that incredibly depressing note, I think I'm going to go.
I'm waiting for your
Yeah.
bye, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Bye.